The story of how Jake found his family begins not with a loud event, but with a very quiet boy. Jake was 13 years old, and he carried a deep feeling of loneliness inside him like a second shadow. He lived in what is called a foster home, a temporary place for children who, for various reasons, cannot live with their parents. This was his third new home in just 2 years. Each move felt like being a book that was picked up, glanced at, and then placed back on a different shelf, never being read from beginning to end. He had learned that making friends often led to goodbyes, and goodbyes always stung. So he became quiet, speaking only when necessary, believing it was safer to be unnoticed. His afternoons were spent walking through the streets of his newest neighborhood, his hands in his pockets, watching the world from a distance. He saw families through their windows, sharing meals and laughter, and he wondered what it would be like to have a place that truly felt like his own. He was a boy adrift on a wide, empty sea, though he had almost, but not quite, given up on hoping to find a shore. Jake's afternoon walk was usually a quiet time, a space where his own thoughts were the only sound. He followed his usual path, his sneakers scuffing softly on the pavement, not really looking at the houses he passed. His mind was somewhere else, wrapped in the familiar feeling of being separate from everything around him. The world seemed to move in a bright, noisy circle, and he was on the outside of it, looking in. That was when a new sound broke through his thoughts. It was not a loud sound. It was the sound of a struggle. There were small, determined grunts and the sharp, worried rustle of a paper grocery bag about to lose its battle with gravity. Jake stopped walking and looked up. On the porch of a small blue house with a slightly overgrown lawn, 2 little girls were trying to do a very big job. The older one, who looked to be about 8, was wrestling with a grocery bag so full that its corners were straining. She was trying to haul it up the wooden steps. Behind her, a younger girl, no more than 6, was pushing the bottom of the bag with all her might, her little face scrunched up in effort. But the bag was too heavy. It wobbled precariously, and a single apple escaped, bouncing down the steps and onto the grass. Without a single second of thought, as if his body decided before his mind could, Jake moved. He walked quickly up their driveway, his own loneliness forgotten for a moment. He bent down, picked up the apple, and looked at the 2 girls. "Need a hand?" he asked. His voice was a little rough from not being used much. The older girl, Mia, looked up, startled. She was flushed from the effort. She nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and relief. "It's heavier than we thought," she admitted. Jake simply nodded back. He carefully took the bulky bag from them. It was indeed heavy, but for a 13-year-old boy, it was easy. He carried it steadily up the remaining steps. The younger girl, Lily, stared at him with unabashed curiosity, her previous worry replaced by wonder at this sudden helper. Mia pushed the front door open and held it for him. "We're not supposed to lift heavy stuff," she explained, "but Mom is at work." Jake stepped inside their home. It was different from his quiet, tidy foster home. This house was full of life. The air smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap. The living room was a little messy, with colorful drawings taped to the walls and a pile of board games stacked in a corner. A well-loved teddy bear sat on the couch. It was not a perfect house, but it was a lived-in house, a loved house. It felt warm. Jake set the grocery bag down carefully on the kitchen counter, the simple act making him feel strangely useful. It was then that Lily, still gazing up at him, asked her innocent, world-changing question. "Are you our new brother?" Lily's question hung in the warm, cinnamon-scented air. "Are you our new brother?" The words were so unexpected, so completely foreign to Jake's life, that he felt his face grow warm. He stood frozen for a second by the kitchen counter, his hand still resting on the grocery bag he had just put down. He quickly shook his head, his voice a soft mumble. "Oh, no, I don't think so. I just live down the street. He was just a boy on a walk. He was not anyone's brother." But Mia, the older sister, was nodding as if a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. "But Mom said," she insisted, her tone matter of fact. "Mom said someone might come to help. She's been really tired since our dad left." Jake opened his mouth to explain, to tell them it was all a mistake, that he was just passing by. But before any words could come out, the front door opened again. A woman stepped inside, letting in a cool breeze from the autumn afternoon. She was carrying a heavy bag of her own and looked very tired, her shoulders slumped with a long day's work. Her eyes, however, were kind. She stopped when she saw Jake, a look of pleasant surprise washing over her tired face. She smiled, a real and warm smile that reached her eyes. "Oh, hello," she said, her voice friendly. "You must be Jake. The community center said they might send a student volunteer over this week to help with some yard work." In that moment, Jake understood the entire misunderstanding. The community center had apparently called. They were expecting a helper, and he, Jake, had walked right into the middle of it. He was not that person. He was about to correct her, to explain the coincidence. He looked at Mia and Lily, who were watching the exchange with hopeful, excited faces. He saw the clear relief on their mother Sarah's face, the way some of the tiredness seemed to lift from her, just knowing help had arrived. For his entire life, Jake had felt invisible, a ghost in other people's homes. But in this cluttered, warm kitchen, these three people saw him. They saw him as a helper. They saw him as needed. The truth that he was just a lonely boy from a foster home felt heavy and complicated. The lie that he was there to help felt simple and kind. So Jake took a small breath and did something he never did. He made a decision that would change everything. He nodded just once. "Yes," he said, his voice a little stronger than before. "I'm here to help." The following day after school, Jake stood at the end of the driveway of the blue house. He felt a nervous flutter in his stomach. He had promised to help, and now he had to follow through. He had never been a volunteer before. He was just a boy who showed up. He walked up to the porch and knocked softly on the door. It was Mia who answered, her face breaking into a bright smile the moment she saw him. "Mom, he's here," she called over her shoulder. Sarah appeared, looking less tired than the day before, and greeted him warmly. She led him to the backyard where a massive pile of autumn leaves waited, a crunchy, colorful mountain against the fence. She handed him a rake. The task was simple, but to Jake it felt important. He worked steadily, the rhythmic scraping of the rake a soothing sound. He was so focused on making neat rows that he didn't notice the girls at first. Then he heard a giggle. He turned to see Mia and Lily standing at the edge of the pile, their eyes sparkling with mischief. "Can we jump in them after?" Lily asked, hopping from one foot to the other. Jake looked at the perfect pile he was creating, and then at their hopeful faces. A small, unfamiliar feeling tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was almost a smile. "Okay," he said. He spent the next hour not just raking, but building the biggest, fluffiest leaf pile two little girls could ever imagine. When he was done, he nodded to them. With shrieks of pure joy, they launched themselves into the crunchy leaves, their laughter filling the chilly air. Jake watched them, and that small, almost smile became a real one. He wasn't just the boy who helped anymore. He was the boy who built the best leaf pile. He started coming by every day. Some days there were real chores like fixing a wobbly table leg or helping carry in more groceries. Other days the help was different. He helped Mia with her math homework, patiently explaining the problems until her frown turned into an excited, "I get it." He helped Lily build elaborate pillow forts in the living room, engineering structures so grand she declared herself their queen. The blue house became his second home, or maybe his only real one. He learned the rhythm of their lives. He learned that Sarah worked 2 jobs, one during the day and one in the evening, which was why she was always so tired. He learned that their father was gone and wasn't coming back, a fact the girls stated simply, a quiet sadness in their home that Jake understood in his own way. His presence there, his small acts of help, began to lighten the weight they all carried. The lonely walks after school stopped. Now he walked with a purpose. He was Jake, who knew how to make the perfect peanut butter and banana sandwich. He was Jake, who could tell a story that made them all laugh. He was becoming woven into the fabric of their family, and with every passing day, the lonely boy he had been began to fade, replaced by someone who belonged. It began as a low rumble in the distance, a grumble of thunder that made the windows of the blue house vibrate softly. Jake was in the backyard, finally gathering the last of the fallen twigs from the old oak tree. He looked up at the sky, which had turned a bruised, purplish gray. The air felt heavy and electric. He hurried to finish, the first cold drops of rain beginning to splatter on the leaves around him. By the time he reached the back porch, the sky had opened up. The rain was not falling. It was being thrown against the house in fierce horizontal sheets. The wind howled, rattling the gutters and making the trees sway wildly. Suddenly, with a quiet pop, the lights inside the house went out. Everything went dark and silent except for the roar of the storm outside. From the living room, Jake heard a small, frightened whimper. Then another. He felt his way inside, his eyes adjusting to the deep gray gloom. He found Mia and Lily huddled together on the couch, a single blanket pulled up to their chins. Lily's face was wet with tears, and even Mia, who always tried to be brave, looked terrified. "Mom's at work," Mia said, her voice trembling. "She won't be home for hours." Jake knew about being scared in the dark. He knew about waiting for a grown-up who wasn't coming. But in that moment he wasn't the scared kid anymore. He was the helper. He was the big kid. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I know what to do." He remembered seeing a flashlight in a kitchen drawer. He found it and clicked it on, creating a brave little circle of light in the middle of the room. He gathered every candle he could find and lit them, their warm, dancing flames pushing the scary shadows back into the corners. The room felt cozy now, not frightening. He sat on the floor next to the couch and started telling them a long, silly story about a dragon who was terribly afraid of loud noises and dark caves. He made up funny voices for the characters. Slowly, the girls' sniffles subsided. A giggle escaped from Lily. Then Mia joined in. Their fear was melting away, replaced by the sound of their laughter mixing with the storm's fury outside. Exhausted from the emotion, they eventually fell asleep, nestled together on the couch. Jake stayed on the floor, keeping watch. This is where Sarah found them hours later, when she finally made it home, soaked and worried. The storm had passed. She saw the burned-down candles. She saw her daughters sleeping peacefully, and she saw Jake awake and watching over them, the flashlight still glowing in his hand. She didn't see a volunteer from the community center. She saw a protector. She saw a guardian. She saw, for the first time, a son. Life in the blue house settled into a new and wonderful rhythm for Jake. He spent less and less time at his foster home, often staying for dinner and helping with the evening routine. He felt a sense of peace he had never known, a feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be. One evening, after a particularly good dinner of spaghetti and meatballs, Sarah asked him to stay after the girls had gone to bed. The house was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator. Jake helped her clear the table, a comfortable silence between them. He assumed she needed help with another chore, perhaps a leaky faucet or a high shelf that needed dusting. When they finished, she gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table with her. She looked nervous, which was unusual. She took a deep breath. "Jake," she began, her voice gentle but serious, "I need to talk to you about something important." Jake's heart gave a little jump. He worried for a moment that he had overstayed his welcome, that the comfortable rhythm was about to break. But her eyes were kind. She told him that she had done some asking around. She had spoken to his social worker. She had learned the truth about that first day, that he was not from the community center, that he was a foster child who had shown them an incredible kindness by walking into their lives and pretending to be their helper. Jake looked down at the table, his cheeks warm with a mixture of embarrassment and fear. He waited for her to be upset about the lie, but she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I am not angry, Jake, not at all," she said, and he could hear the truth in her words. "I am so grateful. You came into our lives when we needed someone most." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "You have become such an important part of this family. You are a brother to my girls. You are a son to me in every way that matters." Jake's breath caught in his throat. He dared to look up. Sarah's eyes were shining. "So," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with a powerful hope, "I have started the process to become a foster parent myself. The paperwork is filed. I wanted to ask you, properly, how you would feel about staying here. Not just helping, but staying, for good, as part of our family, officially." The world seemed to stop. The hum of the refrigerator faded away. For his entire life, Jake had been a guest, a temporary resident in other people's worlds. He had learned not to want things, not to hope for them, because hopes were so often met with disappointment. But here it was, the deepest, most secret wish of his heart, offered to him not as a dream but as a real possible future. He was being asked to stay. He was being chosen. He looked at Sarah, at this woman who had shown him nothing but kindness, and who saw him not as a problem, but as a gift, and he found that he could not speak. All he could do was nod a single, firm, and heartfelt nod that held a universe of meaning inside it. Yes, the official paperwork, as it often does, took its time. There were meetings with social workers and forms to be signed. But a family's heart does not wait for paperwork. For Jake, the change was immediate and profound. He moved his few belongings from the quiet foster home into the bustling blue house. Mia and Lily insisted he share their room, and they worked together to make space for his bed by the window. That first night, as he lay in the dark listening to the soft, sleepy breaths of his sisters, he looked out at the stars. They seemed to twinkle just for him, as if welcoming him home. A few days later, the girls presented him with something they had made in secret. It was a large piece of paper, a colorful drawing made with crayons and markers, and a great deal of love. In the center was a blue house with a bright yellow door. Standing in front of it were 4 stick figures. There was a tall one labeled Mom. There was a medium one with messy hair labeled Jake. And there were 2 smaller ones labeled Mia and Lily. Above them, a smiling sun shone down, and in wobbly, carefully written letters across the top it said, "Our Family." Jake held the drawing in his hands, and he felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling so big and so bright it threatened to spill out of his eyes. He looked from the paper to the beaming, hopeful faces of his sisters. He thought about the lonely boy who had knocked on the door just a few months ago, a boy who believed he was only there to help for an afternoon. That boy had no idea he was actually walking into his own story, a story that was just beginning. He was not the helper anymore. He was the brother. He was the son. He was not a guest. He was not a visitor. He was home. The lonely feeling that had been his constant companion for so long was gone, replaced by the sure and steady knowledge that he belonged. He had finally found his shelf. The MD